From a distance, a medieval castle could look almost peaceful. Stone walls rising from a hill, towers watching over the land, banners moving in the wind, a gate standing silent beneath the battlements. But if you were part of the army sent to attack it, that same castle would not look peaceful at all. It would look like a warning. Because a medieval castle was not just a home for nobles, it was not just a symbol of power, and it was not just a stone building on a hill, it was a weapon. Every wall, ditch, tower, gate, staircase, and narrow passage was designed to make your life harder, to slow you down, expose your body, break your courage, and force you to pay for every step forward. Attacking a castle was not one simple battle. It was a long, brutal test of fear, patience, engineering, hunger, disease, and death. You might march for days just to reach it. You might spend weeks outside it. You might watch men die before they ever touched the walls. And even if you finally broke through the gate, the nightmare might only be beginning. Because castles were built to survive. They did not have to defeat an army in open battle. They only had to last longer than the attackers could afford. Longer than their food, longer than their money, longer than their patience, longer than their morale. That is why attacking a medieval castle was a nightmare. To understand it, you have to stop seeing the castle from the Lord's point of view. You have to see it from the ground, from the mud, from the ditch, from the ladder, from the man looking up at the wall, knowing he may be the first to climb. The first problem was the castle's location. Many castles were built where the land itself became part of the defense. A castle on a hill forced attackers to climb before they could fight. A castle on a cliff made direct assault almost impossible from one side. A castle near a river could control bridges, crossings, and supply routes. A castle surrounded by marshland could slow an army before it reached the walls. A castle in a mountain pass could block movement through an entire region. This mattered because medieval armies were not fast, clean machines. They moved with horses, wagons, armor, weapons, tents, food, servants, engineers, animals, and supplies. A bad road could slow everything. Mud could trap wheels. Rain could ruin movement. Hills could exhaust men before the battle began. So before the army even attacked, the castle was already winning. The defenders watched from above. They could see the dust of the approaching force. They could close the gates, stock the walls, prepare arrows, check the stores, send messengers, and wait. The attackers, meanwhile, had to come closer in full view. Every step told the defenders where they were. Every delay gave the castle more time. And if the castle stood on high ground, the attacking army had to move upward toward men who were already prepared to kill them. Climbing toward an enemy is a terrible position. Your legs burn, your armor feels heavier, your shield arm tires. You look up and see stone, arrows, and faces watching from the battlements. The battle has not even begun, but the castle has already made you weaker. Then came the outer defenses. Before an attacker could reach the wall, he might have to cross a ditch, moat, earthwork, wooden barrier, or open killing ground. A moat was not always a clean ring of water like in stories. Sometimes it was a dry ditch, sometimes it was muddy, sometimes it was steep. Sometimes it was filled with water, filth, debris, or obstacles. Its purpose was simple: stop the attacker from moving quickly, because speed was life. If you could rush the wall, maybe you had a chance. If you were slowed down in the open, you became a target. Imagine standing at the edge of a ditch while arrows begin to fall. The men behind you are pushing forward. The men in front of you are slipping down the slope. Someone falls, someone drops a shield, someone screams. You are carrying weight on your body, maybe a ladder, maybe tools, maybe a weapon. You cannot run properly, you cannot hide. And above you, defenders are waiting behind stone. The moat did not need to kill everyone, it only needed to delay them, to turn order into confusion, to make men bunch together, to leave them exposed long enough for arrows, stones, and panic to do the work. And once the ditch was crossed, the attacker still had to face the walls. The wall was the most obvious defense, but also one of the most terrifying. A high stone wall turned the entire battle upward. The defenders stood above, the attackers stood below. That single fact changed everything. From above, defenders could shoot arrows, throw stones, drop heavy objects, and strike down at anyone who came close. From below, attackers had to look up, protect themselves, and somehow reach men who had every advantage. This is where the ladder assault began. And for the men chosen to climb, it was almost a death sentence. A ladder attack sounds simple. Place the ladder against the wall, climb it, reach the top, fight your way onto the battlements. But in reality, it was chaos. The ladder had to be carried under fire. It had to be raised while men were being shot. It had to land against the wall at the right angle. Then someone had to climb first. That first man knew what waited above him. Defenders could push the ladder away, drop rocks, stab downward with spears, cut at hands, strike his head, shoot him before he reached the top. He had one hand on the ladder, a shield awkwardly above him, his body exposed, his feet on narrow rungs. If the ladder tipped, every man on it could fall. If the men below panicked, the climb could collapse. If the defenders struck at the right moment, the first attacker might die before he even raised his weapon. And even if he reached the top, he arrived tired, vulnerable, and surrounded. He had to pull himself over the battlements into a group of defenders who had been waiting for him. The wall turned height into violence. It made courage feel useless. But castles were not built around one wall alone. Many had layers, an outer wall, an inner wall, a courtyard, a keep, a final stronghold. This meant that even if attackers took the first wall, they had not necessarily captured the castle. They had only entered the next danger. This was defense in depth. The defenders could fall back, lock another gate, regroup in another position, shoot from higher ground, and force the attackers to fight again. For the army outside, this was devastating. Every success cost lives, and every success revealed another obstacle. The castle did not ask the attacker to win once, it forced him to win again and again. The gate looked like the obvious weakness. It was also one of the deadliest places to attack. Every castle needed an entrance, and attackers knew that gates were usually more vulnerable than walls. So castle builders turned the gatehouse into a trap. A strong gatehouse could have thick wooden doors reinforced with iron, a portcullis that could drop down and block the passage, murder holes in the ceiling, arrow loops in the walls, narrow corridors, side chambers, and sometimes multiple gates, one behind another. To an attacker, the gate seemed like the way in. To the defender, it was a killing chamber. Imagine the attacking soldiers finally break through the first door. For a moment, they think they have done it. They rush inside. The noise changes. The open battlefield becomes a tight stone passage. Then the portcullis crashes down behind them. Another door blocks the way forward. The men are trapped in a narrow space. They cannot spread out. They cannot use numbers. They cannot bring horses. They can barely swing weapons. Above them, defenders attack through murder holes. From the sides, arrows come through narrow openings. The men in front are crushed against the barrier. The men behind are shouting to move forward. The men inside begin to realize the truth. They have not entered the castle. They have entered the trap. The gatehouse was terrifying because it punished success. The closer attackers came to victory, the more dangerous the space became. Then there were towers. A flat wall gave defenders height, but towers gave them angles. From a tower, defenders could shoot along the face of the wall, striking enemies who were trying to approach the base. This meant attackers were not only threatened from the front, they could be hit from the sides. A man trying to protect himself from arrows above might suddenly be struck from a tower to his left. A group pushing toward the wall could be caught in crossing fire. Towers also allowed defenders to see more. They watched the land, tracked movement, signaled danger, protected weak points, and kept pressure on attackers below. Round towers were especially useful because they were harder to undermine and better at deflecting force. Square towers could have corners that were more vulnerable, but round towers spread impact more evenly. Every design choice mattered. Because siege warfare was a contest of adaptation, attackers built new machines, defenders strengthened walls, attackers dug tunnels, defenders listened for them, attackers used siege towers, defenders built ditches, raised walls, or set them on fire. A castle was not just stone. It was centuries of military lessons turned into architecture. Even the smallest openings were designed to favor the defenders. Arrow slits, also called arrow loops, allowed archers to shoot while staying protected behind stone. From outside, the opening looked tiny. From inside, it could widen enough for the archer to aim. So the attacker saw only a narrow line in the wall, but the defender saw the battlefield. To the man outside, arrows seemed to come from the castle itself. Shooting back was almost impossible. The target was too small, the defender had cover, the attacker had none. Again and again, the castle created the same pattern. One side exposed, the other protected, one side climbing, the other waiting, one side bleeding, the other holding. But the nightmare did not end if attackers made it inside. The interior of a castle could also be designed to slow and control movement. Narrow passages stopped large groups from advancing together. Small doors created bottlenecks. Sharp turns broke momentum. Tight staircases made fighting difficult. In many castles, spiral staircases favored defenders above, especially if most fighters were right-handed. An attacker climbing upward might have less room to swing a sword. A defender striking downward might have the better angle. Not every staircase worked the same way, and castles varied widely, but the principle remained. The space inside a castle could be shaped against the attacker. Imagine forcing your way through a doorway only wide enough for 1 or 2 men. You do not know what waits beyond it. You cannot see around the corner. Your armor scrapes stone. Your shield catches the wall. The man behind you pushes forward. The man in front of you falls. There is no room to step aside, no room to breathe. Every corridor becomes a fight. Every stair becomes a risk. Every door becomes a question. A castle could turn its own interior into another battlefield. And at the center of many castles was the keep. The keep was often the last refuge, the strongest point, the final place defenders could retreat if outer defenses failed. It could hold supplies, protect the lord, shelter important people, and give defenders one last position to resist. For attackers, this was exhausting. They might cross the ditch, reach the wall, survive the arrows, break the gate, fight through the courtyard, only to find that the defenders had retreated into another fortress inside the fortress. Now the assault had to begin again, another door, another climb, another set of defenders above them. This is what made castles so frustrating. They made victory expensive. Even success felt like punishment. But attackers did not arrive empty-handed. They brought machines. One of the most famous was the battering ram. The battering ram was a heavy beam used to smash gates or weaken walls. In theory, it was simple: hit the gate until it breaks. In practice, using a ram was terrifying. The men operating it had to get close to the castle, so close that every defender above could see them. They pushed the ram under arrows, stones, and fire. Sometimes the ram had a protective roof, but that roof could be burned, broken, or targeted. The defenders might drop rocks, shoot through gaps, throw hooks, pour water, sand, or other materials, or try to set the machine on fire. Every swing of the ram was a risk. The men inside the cover could hear the impacts, the shouting above, the arrows striking the wood, the screams when something came through. They could not easily run. They could not always see what was happening. They had to keep swinging again and again until the gate broke, or they did. Then came siege towers. A siege tower was one of the most dramatic weapons of medieval siege warfare. It was a tall wooden structure built to roll toward the walls and allow attackers to cross onto the battlements at a similar height as the defenders. To the men inside it, a siege tower might have felt like hope. Finally, they would not have to climb ladders under the same deadly disadvantage. Finally, they could meet the defenders at the wall, but a siege tower was also a massive target. It needed flat ground, it needed wheels, it needed men to push it, it needed protection, it needed time. And time was exactly what defenders wanted to exploit. A ditch or moat could stop it completely, mud could trap it, uneven ground could slow it, fire could destroy it, arrows could kill the men pushing it, stones could smash its frame, and if it reached the wall, the danger was still not over. The first soldiers to cross from the tower onto the battlements entered a brutal fight at the edge of death. Behind them, men pushed forward. In front of them, defenders fought to hold the wall. Below them, the ground waited. A siege tower looked powerful from a distance, but inside it was wood, fear, heat, noise, and the knowledge that one flame could turn the whole machine into a coffin. Trebuchets and other siege engines brought a different kind of terror. These machines could throw stones, damage walls, smash roofs, and frighten everyone inside the castle. A large trebuchet was not just a weapon, it was a statement. It told the defenders that the attackers had engineers, resources, and time. The sound alone could be terrifying. The creak of timber, the strain of ropes, the release, the heavy stone rising into the sky, then the impact. A roof collapses, a tower cracks, a courtyard erupts, people run for cover. But siege engines were difficult to use. They were expensive, they required skill, they needed ammunition, they needed space. They took time to build, aim, and maintain, and strong walls could survive repeated attacks, especially if defenders repaired damage quickly. A siege engine could make a castle bleed, but not always enough to kill it. So attackers sometimes tried a darker method. If they could not go through the wall, If they could not go over it, they might go under it. Mining was one of the most dangerous and frightening forms of siege warfare. Attackers called sappers dug tunnels beneath the castle walls. The goal was to weaken the foundation. Sometimes they supported the tunnel with wooden beams. Then when the time was right, they burned the supports. If it worked, the ground shifted, the wall cracked, a section collapsed, and the attackers rushed toward the breach. But mining was slow and terrifying. Men worked underground in cramped darkness. The air was bad, the tunnel could collapse, the work was exhausting. They dug while knowing the defenders might hear them, and if the defenders detected the tunnel, they could dig a countermine. Then the battle moved beneath the earth. Imagine crawling through a narrow tunnel under a castle wall. You hear scraping from the other side. You stop breathing for a moment. The enemy is digging too. There is no sunlight, no open field, no room to swing properly. Only dirt, wooden supports, tools, sweat, and fear. If the tunnels met, men could fight underground in darkness. The defenders might flood the mine, smoke it out, collapse it, or attack inside it. Mining turned the siege into a hidden war beneath the ground, and if the tunnel failed, the men inside could be buried alive. But many castles did not fall because of ladders, rams, towers, engines, or tunnels. They fell because of hunger. Starvation was one of the most powerful weapons in medieval warfare. An army could surround a castle and wait. No food in, no supplies out, and no easy escape. No reinforcements unless someone came to break the siege. Inside the castle, defenders counted what they had: grain, salted meat, ale, water, firewood, animals, arrows, medical supplies. At first, they might feel confident. A well-stocked castle could hold for a long time, but time changed everything. Rations became smaller, animals were slaughtered, food stores were guarded. Arguments began. The rooms grew stale and foul, filled with damp clothing, smoke, waste, and the exhaustion of people trapped too closely together. The people inside started watching one another differently. Soldiers needed strength to defend the walls. The lord and his family might receive better portions. Servants and lower-ranking people might suffer first. If villagers had fled inside for protection, there were even more mouths to feed. A castle under siege could become a place where safety slowly turned into desperation. Water could become even more important than food. A castle with a reliable well inside the walls had a major advantage. A castle without one was in serious danger. If the water source was outside the walls, attackers could block it. If it was poisoned, damaged, or controlled, panic could spread. People can endure hunger longer than thirst. Without water, the castle's strength could vanish quickly. Then came disease. Disease was the enemy that did not need a ladder. Crowded people, poor sanitation, stress, rotting food, dirty water, animals packed into limited space, bodies weakened by hunger. A siege created perfect conditions for sickness. The walls that protected people also trapped them together. Waste became harder to manage. Rooms became foul. Insects and rats spread. The sick grew weaker. The healthy became afraid of breathing the same air. A castle could survive arrows and stones, then collapse from fever. Outside the walls, the attackers also suffered. A siege camp was not safe. Men slept in rough conditions. Food had to be brought in. Animals needed feeding. Waste piled up. Rain turned the camp to mud. Cold weakened bodies. Disease could spread through the besieging army too. This was the strange horror of siege warfare. The castle trapped the defenders inside, but the siege trapped the attackers outside. Both sides waited. Both sides suffered. Both sides watched time become a weapon. And then came the psychological pressure. For those inside, the enemy campfires burned every night. For those outside, the castle walls stood every morning. Neither side could easily escape the sight of the other. The defenders could watch siege towers being built. The attackers could watch the castle refuse to fall. The defenders heard stones strike the walls. The attackers heard bells, horns, and shouts from above. Rumors spread. No rescue is coming. The food is almost gone. The well is unsafe. The Lord is negotiating. The attackers are preparing another assault. The defenders will show no mercy. The mine became another battlefield. An army outside might burn nearby villages, destroy crops, display prisoners, shout threats, send messages, or execute someone in view of the walls. The goal was to break morale, because a castle did not always need to be physically destroyed. It only needed to become hopeless. Surrender was sometimes the smartest choice, but surrender was dangerous. If defenders surrendered early, they might receive mercy. If they resisted too long, attackers might punish them severely once they broke in. That created a terrible calculation. Hold out and hope for rescue, surrender and hope the enemy keeps their word. Resist too long and risk slaughter. Give in too soon and be remembered as cowards or traitors. For the Lord inside, every decision had consequences. For the ordinary people trapped inside, those decisions could mean life or death, but the attackers had their own problems. A siege was expensive. Armies needed food, pay, animals, equipment, tools, and time. The longer they stayed, the harder it became. Weather could turn against them. Mud could ruin roads. Disease could spread. Supplies could run low. Soldiers could desert. Another enemy could attack from behind. A relief army could arrive. Winter could make everything worse. This was the true strength of castles. They forced an army to stop. A moving army had options. A besieging army had commitment. It had to stay in place, burn through supplies, and hope the castle broke first. Sometimes the castle did not have to win. It only had to last longer than the attacker could afford. That is what made attacking a medieval castle a nightmare. The castle turned war into patience. It turned stone into strategy. It turned time into a weapon. It forced the attacker to choose between immediate danger and slow suffering. Assault the walls and die quickly. Wait outside and weaken slowly. Try the gate and enter a trap. Build a tower and watch it burn. Dig a tunnel and risk being buried. Starve the castle and risk starving your own army. There was no easy answer, and that was the point. Castles were not invincible. Some fell to assault, some fell to starvation, some fell to betrayal, some fell to mining, some fell when defenders lost hope, and later gunpowder weapons changed the balance of war. But for much of the Middle Ages, a strong castle was one of the hardest military problems an army could face. Its power came from layers. The landscape exhausted you. The moat slowed you, the walls exposed you, the towers watched you, the arrows found you, the gatehouse trapped you, the staircases narrowed you, the keep forced you to fight again. And if none of that broke you, time waited. Hunger, disease, fear, rain, cold, desertion, doubt. A castle was built to make the attacker feel small, to make him look up, to make him slow down, to make him bleed before he could strike. It transformed architecture into violence and patience into power. So the next time you see a medieval castle standing on a hill, remember what it meant to the men outside it. It was not just a beautiful ruin, it was not just a home for knights and nobles, it was a warning in stone. Those walls were shields, those towers were weapons. That gate was a trap, that ditch was the first wound, and every step closer came with a price. For the defenders, the castle was protection. For the Lord, it was power. For the people nearby, it was control. But for the army ordered to take it, it was a nightmare, a place where courage could be wasted, where machines could burn, where ladders could fall, where men could starve within sight of the walls, where disease could kill more quietly than arrows, and where even victory could cost more than anyone expected. That is why attacking a medieval castle was a nightmare.